I can't give this an entirely glowing review, but it does have all the right elements. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2019 biopic, Radioactive, which will be released on Amazon Prime Video on July 24th. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Radioactive stars Rosamund Pike, Sam Riley, and Anya Taylor-Joy, and was directed by Marjane Satrapi. Based on the graphic novel by Lauren Redniss, it tells the story of physicist and chemist Marie Curie, played by Rosamund Pike. Because of my science background, I always find myself being drawn to movies like this. Science-centric films aren't all that common, and scientist biopics are even more rare. But biopics about female scientists, they're almost as hard to find as a new element. And so, back when I first heard about this film last fall, it definitely piqued my interest. There are a lot of scientists whose stories I would love to see brought to the big screen, but I'm so happy that Madame Curie has become one of the select few. Her science and her work, both in and out of the lab, fundamentally changed the world and still deeply impact us today. Countless advancements in medical technology would have never occurred had it not been for her, and she was a pioneer for women in science. So the fact that this film even exists is awesome, because it means a ton of people who don't know who she is and what she did for the world now will. That being said, beyond its very interesting subject, Radioactive is a fairly typical biopic. And I don't think that's really a bad thing. It falls into a few of the biopic pitfalls and doesn't do anything super creative with its story, but it was still pretty solid. And so I think people's opinions are really going to depend on if they like biopics or not. If you can't stand the genre, this probably won't be one to change your mind. But if you like biopics, then most of the film's issues won't bother you too much because they're kind of par for the course. One of the most detrimental biopic pitfalls is attempting to cram too much into the story. And it's such a hard thing, because you're trying to tell the story of a person's life in 2 hours. So of course the natural inclination is to try to include as much of their life as you can. But that really becomes an impossible task, because there's no way to satisfyingly distill 66 years of a person's life. And so many biopics, including Radioactive, take a greatest hits approach to their subject's life. We get a little childhood background, some time spent on their biggest achievements, jump around through a series of big life moments, and then death. It gets the job done, but feels obviously formulaic, and leaves each viewer wishing the movie had spent more time on some different aspect of that person's life. Again, it's a tough thing to deal with, which is a big part of why making a really good biopic is hard. This film covers essentially Marie Curie's entire life, and it's understandable because she did some major movie-worthy things throughout her life. She began her famous research and met her husband in her late 20s, discovered 2 elements and became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize in her 30s, and became a professor, won a second Nobel, and led a World War I Red Cross radiology service in her 40s. So criticizing the movie for its jam-packed story is easy, but thinking about what elements of Madame Curie's life should have been cut out or exclusively focused on is a much more challenging task. Despite spanning the majority of Curie's adult life, this movie definitely felt like it had 2 distinct halves. The first half was a fast-paced whirlwind of discovery and certainly much more science-focused. We've got plenty of Bunsen burners and flasks and exciting science talk, and then the movie shifts to something more emotional and intangible. It's less about the science and more about the effects that science had on not only Madame Curie and her family, but also the world. And the pacing changes with that shift. For the most part, it's quite a bit slower, but much like Radium, it was also pretty unstable. Things would speed up and get kind of exciting for a bit, and then slow way down and spend a strangely long amount of time on a random moment. And this pacing issue was only compounded by the script structure and clunky stylistic choices. While the core of the movie is told in a chronological way, there are a number of flashbacks and flash forwards that happen. The flashbacks are pretty much confined to one defining moment of Curie's childhood, but it's the intercut flash forwards that are the peculiar choices that don't work that well for me. we see an assortment of moments, historical for us, future for Madame Curie, in which her research, or derivatives of her research, have a major effect on the world. And I can understand the intent of these flash forwards, to show the eventual impacts, both good and bad, that she and her husband's discoveries would have. And I think they're important and interesting moments, but ultimately beyond the scope of this film, because they all happened after Madame Curie's death, so the time spent on them could have been reallocated to moments of her life. As with any biopic, the casting was an important thing here, and I think Rosamund Pike did a fantastic job as Marie Curie. She was really able to capture the strength and bluntness of the character without getting too comical or too annoying. The film has several minor characters who all do a fine job, but the other lead here was Sam Riley as Madame Curie's husband, Pierre, and I think he too was a great choice. The two of them had really good chemistry, which I guess was fitting, but it's a unique type of chemistry, and not the usual romance style you might expect to see in a movie like this. They both have this sort of awkwardness and mutual respect for one another, so it's fun to watch their relationship blossom and satisfying to see them working together. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one is the story and subject matter. Madame Curie and her work have had such huge impacts on the world, so I think it's great that we finally got a movie that showcases not only her work, but also her. Given my background, I've got a bit of a predisposition for enjoying science-based movies, so I thought the story of her life was really compelling and interesting. People who aren't as interested in science may find some of the science-y things in the first half a bit dull, but again, it's about her life, so it's not just science. The second pro has gotta be Rosamund Pike. Madame Curie could have been a very unlikable character in this movie. She's self-absorbed, a bit awkward at times, a bit aloof at others, extremely blunt and stubborn and outspoken, but Rosamund Pike was able to encapsulate all those qualities and more to provide us with a very real-feeling character. She becomes strong and motivated and funny, and she isn't just a static caricature. Certain traits last through her lifetime, but her personal relationships have a definite impact on her, and Pike's able to deliver on that front too. On the con side, the biggest problem was the structure and style. The movie tried to touch on the far-reaching impacts of Curie's work, but unfortunately, those aspects of the story feel very superficial and just barely grazed. It tries too hard to reach beyond the scope of Madame Curie's life, and ends up structurally suffering by intercutting future moments in history with the story at hand. Even beyond these flash forwards, there are some stylistic choices that end up being a bit distracting, like some inconsistently soft lighting and a few very odd instances of intercut still images. The second con's a very typical biopic pitfall, but it's that there's too much crammed into the story. Again, it's really hard, because how do you pick and choose what aspects of a person's life are worthy of telling, especially someone as prolific as Madame Curie? And on top of that, it's a biopic, not a documentary, so some of that 2-hour runtime's gotta be devoted to emotion and drama and the narrative, and so I guess I don't have a great solution for this con. I was happy to see so many moments in her life, but couldn't help but feel that most of them were just barely touched on. Personally, I enjoyed the more science-centric first half the best, and would have loved to have seen some more detail and specifics for that. So I think focusing in on her and Pierre's early research and relationship, maybe ending the film with the first Nobel win, could have been a potentially better, less surface-level route, but again, how do you decide not to tell the rest of her story? Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying any of the films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Radioactive 3.5 out of 5 paws. I went back and forth a bit on this one, and maybe if I didn't find the subject matter as interesting as I do, I would have rated this a little lower, but it's a solid biopic about a very interesting person and features some really good performances. I would recommend Radioactive to people who like science movies and fans of biopics. Even better if you fall into both categories. It functions as a fairly standard biopic with all the usual positives and faults that accompany the genre, but it's the subject of the story, Madame Curie, that pushes this particular film into the realm of uniqueness. And I think anybody who's even remotely interested in science, chemistry, physics, medicine, will find parts of this movie really interesting. If you liked Radioactive, I would recommend The Theory of Everything. It's another life-spanning scientist biopic, this time focusing on the life of theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking. If you want to watch another true story about a female scientist, you might want to watch Gorillas in the Mist, which tells the story of primatologist Dian Fossey's work with mountain gorillas. And if you're interested in a true story about one of the many consequences of Madame Curie's research, you should definitely watch Radium Girls, which focuses on a group of women working at the American Radium factory using radium to paint luminous watch dials. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Radioactive? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, who's your favorite female scientist? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information on this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, and if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.